This is my skill for the Introduction to Exercise Science course culminating 2025. The skill that I'll be analyzing is me performing an aerial on beam. The purpose of my skill is to add difficulty value, artistry, and variety to my routine. During this video, I'm going to be going over the 5 general phases of my skill. Each phase is specific movements, including their primary agonist and antagonist muscles, and planes and axes. The first movement is the preliminary movement. This movement is needed to get ready for a skill, and in my case, helps me with balance. First, I have plantar flexion in my right ankle. The agonist is gastrocnemius and soleus, and the antagonist is tibialis anterior. Next, I have knee extension. The agonist is my quadriceps, and the antagonist is my hamstrings. For shoulder flexion, the agonist is the anterior deltoid, and the antagonist is latimus dorsi and posterior deltoid. Elbow extension, the agonist is triceps, and the antagonist is biceps. For hip flexion, the agonist is the gluteus maximus, and the antagonist is iliacus and iliopsoas. All of my preliminary movements are in the sagittal plane and horizontal axis. My next movement is my backswing or recovery movement. This movement is the movement that takes place just before the force-producing movements. In this movement, my right foot is in plantar flexion, the agonist is gastrocnemius and soleus, and the antagonist is tibialis anterior. Both my knees are knee extension, and the agonist is quadriceps, and the antagonist is my hamstrings. During shoulder flexion, the agonist is anterior deltoid, and the antagonist latimus dorsi and posterior deltoid. My elbows are also still in elbow extension, which the agonist is triceps, and the antagonist is biceps. For hip flexion, the agonist is the gluteus maximus, and the antagonist is iliacus and iliopsoas. All of my movements during this stage are on the sagittal plane and horizontal axes. The next movement is the force-producing movements. These movements are executed to produce force for impact or propulsion. Firstly, there is plantar flexion in my right foot. The agonist is gastrocnemius and soleus, and the antagonist is tibialis anterior. As my left foot pushes off, there's dorsiflexion. The agonist is tibialis anterior, and the antagonist is gastrocnemius and soleus. There is knee extension in my right knee, with the agonist being quadriceps and antagonist being hamstrings. And in my left knee, there's knee flexion. The agonist is hamstrings, and the antagonist is quadriceps. During this phase, I have slight hip and trunk flexion. The agonist in the hip is gluteus maximus, and the antagonist is iliacus and iliopsoas. And for trunk flexion, the agonist is rectus abdominis, and the antagonist is erector spinae. The 5 movements I have so far discussed during the force-producing movements phase have been the sagittal plane and the horizontal axes. Next, for force-producing movements, I have shoulder rotation into abduction. You can see how my arm started upwards and rotates slightly backwards. The agonist is the deltoid, and the antagonist is latimus dorsi and teres major. This movement was in the frontal plane and the anterior-posterior axis. My last force-producing movement is elbow extension. The agonist is the triceps, and the antagonist is the biceps. This movement takes place in the sagittal plane and the medial lateral axes. My next movement is critical instant. This is a point that determines how effective the execution of a skill is going to be. I start by showing plantar flexion in both of my feet. The agonist is gastrocnemius and soleus, and the antagonist is tibialis anterior. I have knee extension in both my knees. The agonist is quadriceps, and the antagonist is my hamstrings. For hip extension, the agonist is gluteus maximus, and the antagonist is iliopsoas, rectus femoris, and sartorius. Elbow extension, the agonist is my triceps, and the antagonist is my biceps. My right shoulder is undergoing flexion. The agonist is anterior deltoid, and the antagonist is posterior deltoid. All of my movements so far during the critical instant have been the sagittal plane and transverse axes. My last movement during critical instant is left shoulder abduction with slight flexion. The agonist is anterior deltoid, and the antagonist latimus dorsi. This movement is mainly on the frontal plane with somewhat on the sagittal plane and the anterior-posterior axis but somewhat on the transverse axis. My last movement is my follow-through movement. This is a movement that takes place after the critical instant, and in my case, the ending of my skill. My left foot is neutral and my right foot is in slight dorsiflexion. The agonist is tibialis anterior and the antagonist is gastrocnemius and soleus. My left knee is undergoing knee flexion, the agonist is hamstrings, and the antagonist is quadriceps. And my right knee is undergoing knee extension. The agonist is quadriceps and the antagonist is hamstrings. During this movement, I have slight hip flexion. The agonist is gluteus maximus, and the antagonist is iliacus and iliopsoas. Both my elbows are in elbow extension, with the agonist being triceps and the antagonist being biceps. My last follow-through movement is shoulder flexion. The agonist is anterior deltoid and the antagonist is latimus dorsi and posterior deltoid. All of my follow-through movements took place on the sagittal plane and horizontal axes.